All right, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the documentary film The Work, which is 2017, and it is a documentary about emotional work. But the caveat, the context is that it's set in Folsom Prison with inmates and with people from just regular life that are trying to get out of a rut. It follows three guys who are just sort of stagnant with their life. They're kind of stuck and looking to get unstuck. One of them is a museum associate. The other one is like, I don't know what he does. And there's all the inmates. Some of them have done this before, this intensive group therapy, and some of them are doing it for the first time. And before I even get into my thoughts, I just want to say, if you haven't watched this movie, I don't know that there is a more important movie for you to watch, especially if you're a man. But even if you're not, right? Just because this movie is focused on men being vulnerable with men doesn't mean that you have to be a man to take something from it. That being said, this movie was recommended to me by my brother, my older brother, and he hasn't cried in maybe a decade. And when he recommended it to me, outside of hyping it up, he said, I almost cried watching this movie. Like, I got right to the edge, but I didn't go over it. And to me, that was like him saying, oh, this movie made me cry, right? Because for somebody that has a really difficult time crying, to say that and to even experience that is a big deal. But yeah, so this movie follows these three guys that go in there for a 4-day intensive group therapy with other inmates and non-inmates. And they divide into smaller groups. And so then you've got maybe a group of 12 or 15 men, probably mostly inmates, with these three guys. And at first they're like, I don't really know what to expect, but I feel like these guys want me to cry and I don't want to let them down if I don't. They're all kind of guarded. But the prisoners or the inmates, they're not really that guarded. Some of them are, but some of them who've been there before, they're fucking ready to be overcome with emotion. So what the movie deals with is, why do men have a hard time feeling, and where do those feelings come from? Because those are two very different things. Why do men have a hard time feeling? Well, it's just, you joke around with your friends like, don't be a pussy, dude. Don't be a bitch. And we think but they're just jokes. And they are, but they're also affecting us on a deeper level. If you're in a friend group with a bunch of guys who say, don't be a pussy, if you start to feel anything, that doesn't mean that they don't love you. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. But are you going to cry in front of them? Probably not. And if that's your main friend group, then, it's not going to seem normal to you to cry. And it's not going to seem normal to you to feel. And so where else are you going to do it? Well, you might do it with your girlfriend, right? But then she's going to get the fucking brunt of it, and she's going to get overwhelmed by it, because you can't just put it all on one person. So men, it's just a fact that men do not feel as safe feeling their emotions as women might, right? And it's not about comparing one to the other. It's just, women are better at feeling, and so we use that sort of as a guide. Men do. And then where do the feelings come from that we're trying to avoid? Well, if you didn't already know the answer, it's your childhood. And that doesn't mean that it is like it doesn't mean that it comes from a specific place in your childhood. It is a collective, like a collective of your childhood that it comes from. You know, it could be your parents, it could be a friend group, it could be a girl that broke your heart, it could be teachers. For me, teachers were a big thing, like fucking trying to tell me what to do all the time. So it can come from a lot of different places within your childhood, but that's when you're developing. So if you believe that you have no work to do and that you have had no issues in your childhood whatsoever, then this video is probably not for you. However, if you don't know what the issues were, but you are willing to accept that they come from your childhood, or if you know what the issues are, but you're still having a hard time feeling them, like this video is for you, and this movie is for you. And another really important feature of this movie is that it's men being vulnerable with men. There are no women in the movie. And again, that doesn't mean women can't take from the movie or learn from the movie. But I think that it was very important that there are no women in the group therapy that we are watching. Because a lot of times, you know, fucking 90% of the books that I've read on emotional work are written by women. You know, Brene Brown, Daring Greatly, Alice Miller, The Drama of the Gifted Child, fucking Melody Beattie, Codependency No More, The New Codependent, all these books, right? You watch Brene Brown give her TED Talk. You watch all these people that are, all these women that are talking about emotions. The holistic psychologist on Instagram. And you can still learn a lot from them. It's not to take any credit away from women, but I think very often for men, it is difficult to accept this aspect of vulnerability from a woman, because if they're not seeing the men in their life behave this way, then they're not going to be the first ones to do it, right? Like, they're not going to be the ones that break the ground and that normalize this pussy behavior. But here in this documentary, you get to see some of the baddest motherfuckers on earth. Like, and I'm not saying that in a positive or negative way. I just mean like people that you could be very afraid of if they decided to flip that switch on. Like one of the guys carved through somebody's hip with a fucking like butcher knife and paralyzed them. And that's why he's serving like a life sentence. Other people murdered, other people raped. There are all kinds of offenders in the movie. But, and this is one thing I want to emphasize, is that what the movie does is it shows you that there is really no difference between them and the people that come from the free world. There is no difference between a murderer who is living out their life sentence in prison and me. You know, the difference is this, you know, just that one time where they did flip shit and then commit a heinous crime, and the fact that I haven't, right? But fucking, I got in a fight with an Uber driver once, my brother and I did, and I punched the guy in the face twice after we tussled and rolled on the ground, and then I came this close to kicking him with my right leg, kicking him in the head with all of my might, dude. I came this close. And I'm not saying that would have killed the guy, but, you know, brain damage is a very serious thing, and a kick to the head is not a joke, right? And so I think everyone either has an experience like that or has felt close to having an experience like that, you know? And even if you haven't, I think that we can all get there, right? To say that these people were just born different is fucking bullshit, because nobody was born a violent person. Nobody was born a criminal. Nobody was born a murderer. Nobody was born that way. Um, and if you want just like a shorter video of what I mean by that, watch Quan Wynn's One Last Talk on YouTube. Just One Last Talk. I was not born this way. I'm actually going to have him on the podcast tomorrow. But yeah, so the point is, it's your pain is relative, right? How you express that pain might be different. You know, some of these people suffered the same things, and some of them murdered, some of them didn't. But there's a great example in the movie of this kid that wanted to help his dad out fixing a car, right? His dad was like a mechanic or something. And so the kid goes out and he says, "Hey, Dad, can I help you?" And his dad's like, "Yeah, get this tool for me." The kid doesn't know what the tool looks like, so he goes, brings the wrong tool. Dad says, "Go get it again," fails, does this multiple times. And then the dad just says, "You know what? Just go back inside. Just go be with your mother." And someone might hear that and say like, and then what? You know, what was the big deal? What happened? Where was the trauma? The trauma was that this kid just wanted to be with his dad. He wasn't really like interested in whether or not he could help or not. He just wanted to spend time with his dad, and his dad was rejecting him. And for a 5, 4, 6, 7-year-old, that is trauma. That is what trauma looks like. And so this kid now, he is like a museum associate, and he's just not happy because he feels unworthy. He felt unworthy of his dad's love, and so he feels unworthy of his own love now. Well, if my dad doesn't love me, why the fuck would I love myself, right? I'm not, what am I even doing here? Why do I deserve to be alive if my own parent didn't want me, right? And, you know, odds are his dad wasn't doing this to create this fucking trauma in his life, you know. Odds are his dad had his own trauma that he hadn't dealt with, and this was just how it came out sideways at his kid, which is why it's so important to do this work. And so I won't get into a whole spiel about like my own trauma, but just a brief example of what the movie brought up for me, because I was fucking weeping through this whole movie. You know, I have plenty of stories like that one about the kid with the mechanic, right? Where I'm like, I'm trying to be a part of my dad's life, and he just doesn't know how to allow me to be. And so as a kid, I make up the story that it's my fault. And, you know, my parents would argue about money a lot. Money was a big theme growing up for me because we had a lot of money. We had a fancy house. We had fancy cars. We went to a private school. You know, we had our own cooks, cleaning people, you know, we had a staff of people to do the things that most families just do in their free time. And yet the narrative was that we didn't have money. And the narrative was, for me at least, money separates people, which isn't true, right? People with money can separate people, but money itself is not the root cause of it. And so nowadays, you know, my brother, and it affects people differently, even if they're in the same family, right? My brother, he is very protective of money, because to him, it's like, I don't ever want to feel how I felt when I was a kid, which is, oh, we're running out of money and this is fucking stressful, right? Whereas for me, it's like, if I acquire money, then I'm going to become like my parents. And so if I just don't focus on money at all, then I will be more connected, right? And so both of those mindsets are flawed, because I'm not broke, but I don't have a lot of money. And sure, I've built my life in a way where I don't need a lot of money, but I don't have a car, and I fucking want one, dude. Like, I wish that I had a car. It's fucking raining outside right now. And if I want to go eat my favorite Thai food, I've got to pay $12 for an Uber. And all of a sudden, a nice little $15 to $20 meal turns into $40, 50 if I take it there and back. And if I don't, then I've got to take the bus. And it's there are ways that money does affect my life. And for my brother, it's like, well, he's got a lot of money, but what he's doing with the money is where I think some of the issues lie for him. All of that to say that, it's not just one thing. It can be your parents rejecting you. It can be your parents having conversations with you that they shouldn't have had when you were a 7-year-old kid. And it can be getting your heart broken and then not having anyone to turn to except yourself, which as a small boy is not enough. And this I guess that's probably all I have to say, is just this documentary. There's not very many things like this out there. And whether or not you have an easy time feeling or expressing your emotions, this will still bring something to you. And one of my biggest takeaways from the film was, there's a moment where one of the inmates, he's going through, and I think they call it parts work, right? So where they kind of reenact some of the trauma for them. And one of the inmates, he says, I don't want to live anymore because I don't get to see my kid anymore. My ex-wife, she doesn't ever come visit anymore. So I don't get to see my kid anymore. And I'm serving 55 to life. And he says, I don't want to live anymore. And then this guy gets up and he says, you have to promise me that you're not going to do what you're thinking about doing. Just give me 3 months. Give me 3 months. And if we can't figure out something else by then you can do whatever the fuck you want. And, it turns into this whole emotional, very charged thing for him. And at the end of it, somebody says, when we get to the bottom, like when we get to that dark corner, that dark pit that we're all afraid of getting to, that's where our medicine is at. And something about that just, I guess it reminded me, a year ago today, or a year ago, pretty much a year ago today, I was like going public with a lot of things that I was ashamed of. And some of the people closest to me were not happy about it, and I guess it felt like I was choosing to go into the bottom, because to be on the surface just hadn't been working for me. And I was more miserable on the surface than I was at the bottom, because it was fake. It wasn't who I was. And so, I became very isolated for some time and very guarded. And I received, mostly supportive comments and people and phone calls, but there were some people that weren't supportive. My childhood nanny, somebody that I was considering visiting in Europe, and somebody who was very loving to me when I was a kid, she sent me a like 8-paragraph message on Facebook, and she was saying that I was selfish and that I should have been hit when I was a kid because I was a brat, and just really really revealing to me what she was feeling at the time and what she probably feels about a lot of her own experiences, right? And whether or not she was actively telling me those things or acting them out, they were inside of her, and so they translate. That fucking pain carries over. And at this point in my life, it just shows me, oh, a lot of the people that I had around me growing up, they didn't want me. They weren't looking out for my best interest. They were trying to protect me so that they wouldn't have to feel anything. And that's because of their own trauma. But a lot of the people that we think want the best for us, really what they want is for us to stay the same. And if that's miserable for us, they don't care, because as long as they don't have to watch, their friend or their son or their husband or their wife or whatever, as long as they don't have to watch that person tell the world all of the terrible things that they've done, all the things that they feel ashamed of, and then have to worry about who's going to reject them and who's going to reject me because this person is a part of my life, they would rather that you be miserable, because it's safe. But so when we get to the bottom, it's where our medicine is at. It was just like a reframe, like, oh, I got to the bottom, and I'm not by any means like fulfilled and done and happy and perfect now, because there are many bottoms that we have to get to. But I'm a lot happier than I was 2 years ago. And I am way happier and fulfilled than I am, or than I was when I was in high school. And so, I guess that's the takeaway from this documentary and from this video, is like, there's this perception that our darkest fears are what we should avoid the most. And it is a very, very, it's a misconception, because that's where your greatest strengths lie, and that's where your greatest beauty lies. Everyone's got a bottom, and whether you reach it or not, it's still going to be there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't have to be afraid of that, especially if it becomes more normal. Then it's like, everyone's doing this, we're all in this together, which is how it should be, and how the documentary feels, right? So I guess I'll end it there. Check out the documentary film The Work. It's 2017, Folsom Prison. That should be enough for you to find it. Thank you for watching this video. And if you liked it, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, do all that fun stuff. If you didn't, go about your day. If you hated it, I don't know what you want me to say. But yeah, thank you for watching, and until next week.